A part of this letter that was sent to the judge yesterday was a list of all the communication that the Baldoni and Wayfair team wants from Blake Lively. I think it's about 133 points here of people and different companies that they want all communications with.
Blake Lively is freaking out after Judge Liman exposed her secret move to block 133 people from testifying, including Bradley Cooper, TMZ reporters, and even her husband's director.
But there are other people on this list that I also found extremely interesting. Bradley Cooper.
The judge shut down her delay games and ordered her to hand over key media communications tied to her so-called smear campaign.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
June 23rd. That's the day she's finally set to sit down for a deposition, a word she probably didn't even have in her vocabulary until this year. But now, it's written in all caps on every whiteboard in her legal team's office, circled, highlighted, maybe even underlined in panic red. This isn't just a minor legal blip. Blake's being dragged through a defamation suit by Justin Baldoni, who, after getting a partial dismissal, came back harder and smarter. And honestly, you can't even blame him. The way Blake's team has tried to micromanage every single document, every piece of communication, every tiny detail, it's like watching someone trying to mop the ocean with a paper towel. And surprise, surprise, it's not working. Every attempt to control the narrative is boomeranging right back into her perfectly contoured face.
It is so crazy to me that she filed a lawsuit accusing someone of all these things, and then she refused to show the evidence that it actually happened.
Let's talk about her legal strategy, or should we say, the Olympic-level mental gymnastics she's pulling. Her amended filings didn't just make things worse. They dragged her bestie Taylor Swift straight into the courtroom. Yes, Blake literally submitted paperwork that officially named Taylor as someone with relevant info on everything. From the set environment to creative input to the alleged smear campaign she's crying about in this lawsuit. And then she turned around and begged the court for a protective order to shield those very communications from being released. Wait, what?
She said that Taylor knew relevant information about misconduct on the set and was able to provide information about emotional distress and the damage that it caused to her.
You don't get to shout someone's name in a lawsuit and then play dumb when the other side wants to ask questions about it. Especially not when you're the one who waved Taylor like a flag at every promo event. But no, Blake's team tried to convince the court that these texts were irrelevant. Irrelevant? Girl, you literally said Taylor was there with you shoulder to shoulder through the drama. You're either lying now or you were lying then. Pick one. But you can't spin both and expect people not to notice. You're not starring in Gossip Girl anymore.
And there's a lot of talk about these text messages between Blake Lively and Taylor Swift. Blake Lively is still refusing to show them to Brian Friedman and Justin Baldoni's team.
Now here's where it gets even messier. Wayfair, not buying the nonsense, brought the receipts. Emails, timelines, proof. They showed Blake had amended her disclosures after the public statements about the case started heating up. And just to make things even more shady, her team canceled a scheduled meet and confer call with Wayfair's lawyers and filed for that protective order instead. That's not a legal defense, that's textbook panic. Judge Liman took one look at this chaos and basically said, "You think I'm stupid?" Because clearly, Blake thought the court would just go along with this performance.
So Brian Friedman's big argument for seeing those text messages is that he thinks that in those messages, there are communications where the two of them are talking about what's going on the set of It Ends With Us.
And speaking of performances, let's get into her biggest act yet, the blackout on evidence. Brian Friedman, Baldoni's attorney, dropped a 78-page document, yes, 78 pages, outlining all the information Blake is flat out refusing to produce. At the center of it, the now infamous text messages between her and Taylor Swift. You know, the ones Blake promised would never see daylight. Her excuse? He's already seen them. Oh, really? Because both Baldoni's team and Taylor's reps have stated very clearly that nothing was ever handed over. Not a single message. So now we're stuck in this surreal situation where Blake says she doesn't need to share the messages because the other side already saw them, even though the other side is literally saying, no, we didn't. And somehow she expects that to hold up in federal court. That's not a legal argument, that's gaslighting on a stage this big, it should have pyrotechnics. Blake's own narrative is eating itself alive. Even more laughable is how this contradicts everything she's said publicly. Remember when she gushed in interviews about how Taylor was there for her through the chaos of filming It Ends With Us? About how they leaned on each other and supported each other during that toxic time? And now she wants the world to believe there's nothing in those messages worth seeing? Come on. Either they're just chat logs about brunch and astrology memes, or there's something way more damning. And the way she's clinging to them like they're nuclear codes tells us exactly which one it is. Billboard even chimed in on this circus, pointing out that emotional distress claims, which Blake used to push hard, actually need to be backed up by evidence. You know, actual proof that you suffered in a meaningful way. That's why those texts matter. If she was texting Taylor laughing about the whole mess, or worse, admitting the smear campaign was exaggerated, then that's game over for her side. But instead of coming clean, she's holding those texts hostage and praying nobody presses harder. They are pressing, and she's cracking.
And it says here that Taylor Swift's text could reveal whether Blake Lively suffered actual distress. Although she has dropped the big claims about emotional distress, emotional distress is still a part of the other claims, if that makes any sense.
Now, let's talk about what this all says about her credibility. It's evaporating, rapidly. Judge Liman already ruled against her on several motions and basically said what everyone else is thinking, she's stalling, and her excuses make no sense. And it's not just one or two issues. This entire case is now a web of contradictions, deflections, and narrative U-turns. Every time she opens her mouth or files a new motion, she makes things worse. This isn't the behavior of someone who has nothing to hide. This is what people do when they know their case can't survive daylight. And Blake? She's treating this courtroom like it's an audition, trying to deliver a performance instead of facts. But there's no script here, no sympathetic lighting, and definitely no PR team in the jury box. You can't just play the victim on command when your own paperwork tells a different story. She built her career on image control, but now that same obsession is strangling her credibility in court. From begging the court to ignore her own disclosures, to refusing to hand over messages that could kill her emotional distress claims, to spinning in circles over whether Taylor Swift was involved, it's all unraveling. And June 23rd, that might be the day it all explodes.
And they think that the evidence for that lays in these text messages and communications between Taylor and Blake. They have already told Blake's team that they haven't seen any of the texts, they haven't seen any of the communications.
Because when she finally sits down under oath, with the threat of perjury hanging over every word, there's no PR magic or publicist damage control that can save her. The lies, the contradictions, the deleted receipts, it's all going to come back. And for someone who spent years pretending to be untouchable, Blake Lively is about to learn that the courtroom doesn't care about her aesthetic. It cares about evidence. And right now, all the evidence says she's full of it.
Blake Lively is terrified to show this, and to me that says that she knows there's something in there that they can use, and that's why she's refusing to show it to them.
You thought Blake Lively dragging Taylor Swift into this lawsuit was bad? Get ready, because that was just the warm-up. Let's talk about the 133 individuals and entities that Blake is trying to keep under wraps. Yeah, 133. That's not a witness list. That's a full-blown Hollywood roll call. Brian Friedman's team is now demanding access to Blake's communications with this massive list of names. And honestly, it's not hard to see why she's panicking. Because when you're that busy playing puppet master behind the scenes, the last thing you want is someone tugging on the strings in court. So who exactly is on this list? Try Bradley Cooper for starters. What does Blake have to say to him that's relevant to this case? No one knows, but clearly it's enough to land him on a legal hit list.
Bradley Cooper. They want all communication Blake Lively had with Bradley Cooper.
Then we've got a slew of TMZ journalists. Now that's interesting, Because TMZ doesn't just publish stories, they publish narratives, which means the court wants to know whether Blake's team was feeding them the lines all along. Also flagged is Isabel Ferrer, the film's marketing director. Her name keeps popping up in connection to questionable media decisions, particularly the kind that looks suspiciously coordinated.
They also want all communication that Blake Lively's team had with TMZ reporters, a couple of different TMZ reporters. So now we might find out who planted that story.
Oh, and let's not forget Jenny Slate, because apparently Blake needed her on speed dial too, for reasons that remain completely unclear, until the texts drop, of course. And then there's Liz Plank, the podcast host who dropped Justin Baldoni like a bad habit literally 2 hours after the New York Times article hit. That timing wasn't just suspicious, it was surgical, and now Blake's legal team is being asked to hand over all communications with her. If that wasn't a PR ambush, it was the best accidental coincidence of the decade.
And they want all communications with Jenny Slate and also a reporter from the Daily Mail.
And just to really round out the Hollywood conspiracy web, they also want Blake's texts with Sean Levy, aka the director of Deadpool and Besties with Ryan Reynolds. Why? Because this might finally expose the internal gossip behind the curtain, what was said, what was planned, and what Reynolds may or may not have known. But let's be real. This is not about protecting anyone's privacy. This is about Blake desperately trying to keep the world from seeing just how industrialized her PR machine actually is. It's not damage control anymore, it's media warfare. And Baldoni was the target.
They also want all communication with Sean Levy, who did Deadpool versus Wolverine with Ryan Reynolds.
But wait, the absurdity gets worse. Enter Dr. Leslie Dobson, the self-declared forensic psychologist with a PhD in spreading lies on Instagram. This woman has been playing internet detective for months, posting outlandish theories, made-up allegations, and pretending to have insider knowledge about interviews, HR records, and more. And now, her name's on the legal radar too, because apparently she was the mastermind behind not one, not two, but 3 fake HR complaints accusing Justin Baldoni of sexual harassment on the set of It Ends With Us. Yes, you heard that right. Fake HR complaints. These letters weren't just forged, they were distributed online by Dobson herself, who claimed they were sourced directly from Sony. Problem is, they were never authenticated. The dates were missing, the formatting was shady, and the allegations just so happened to align perfectly with what Blake was trying to argue in her emotional distress narrative. You don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to connect the dots, and you can bet your last lawyer fee that Judge Liman is doing exactly that.
Yesterday, there were so many filings, so many letters to the judge. This judge must be so annoyed at this point from both parties sending motions back and forth. Anyway.
Now the court is asking a very simple and very devastating question. Was Blake's team coordinating with Dobson to prop up fake allegations and smear Baldoni in the public eye? Because if that's even partially true, we're no longer talking about emotional distress. We're talking about evidence tampering and deliberate fabrication, all to make her lawsuit look legitimate. If this turns out to be a coordinated move between Blake's team and Dobson, it's game over for whatever crumbs of credibility she still has left. This isn't some small misstep. This is a scorched earth strategy gone wrong, and the blowback could be nuclear. And speaking of blowback, Judge Louis J. Liman finally dropped his ruling on June 18th. And it's not the kind of news Blake wanted to frame on her wall. Wayfair's motion to compel was granted in part, denied in part. But the parts that got approved? Brutal. Blake now has to hand over all communications with reporters and content creators, the same people she's accused of orchestrating a smear campaign against her. Funny how that works. She claims she's the victim of targeted PR sabotage, but now the court wants to know if she was the one writing the script the whole time. And let's talk about her smear campaign theory for a second. The court didn't just poke holes in it, they brought a legal chainsaw. Judge Liman reminded everyone in the room that opinion-based criticism isn't defamation. So unless someone flat out lied with malicious intent, talking trash isn't a crime, it's free speech. Meaning all those hurt feelings Blake's been crying about? Yeah, they don't hold up in a courtroom. If people online said mean things and didn't break the law doing it, Blake can cry in her Versace robe all she wants. It still won't amount to a winnable case. Also worth noting, Ryan Reynolds is now officially out. The court dismissed all claims against him, and guess what? That means Blake can't drag him into discovery anymore. She tried. Believe me, she tried. But the judge was like, sorry, he's not part of this anymore. Try again later. So much for the power couple strategy. Now she's stuck taking all the heat alone, and she's clearly not built for it. Oh, and her legal tactics? Straight up clown show. She tried blaming anonymous insiders for the quotes Wayfair used in their filings. As if the judge was going to believe that these mysterious sources whispered secrets into the wind, and Wayfair just ran with it. Judge Liman basically said, if you don't want this in court, stop putting it in the press. And he's right. Blake has been using the media as her personal megaphone while whining about being the target of unfair coverage. It's hypocrisy, wrapped in contradiction, sprinkled with bad acting. In fact, Judge Liman called her out directly for wasting time and creating confusion. Her strategy isn't legal, it's theatrical. She's not trying to prove anything. She's just throwing glitter at the courtroom and hoping the judge gets distracted. But this judge isn't starstruck. He sees right through her, and so does everyone else paying attention. At this point, Blake's entire defense looks like a Pinterest board of failed manipulation tactics. She tried dragging Taylor into the mix. That backfired. She tried hiding behind fake HR complaints. That blew up. She blamed reporters, content creators, her husband, and unnamed insiders. All of it failed. The only person left to blame is herself. And if she's still hoping this all goes away quietly, someone better tell her the courtroom doesn't believe in plot armor, because the only thing Blake Lively has managed to accomplish in this entire circus is exposing just how desperate she is to avoid the truth. And when that truth finally hits the witness stand, it's going to tear through her story like wildfire. Blake Lively has officially reached the part of the lawsuit where she starts calling every negative headline a smear campaign. Because when your legal case is falling apart, why not pretend the media is bullying you? Her entire lawsuit is now hanging by a thread, and that thread is the idea that people talking about her, including journalists, bloggers, and influencers, somehow constitutes targeted harassment. But here's the thing. The court doesn't care if Blake doesn't like what's being said. The judge has made it crystal clear that talking to journalists is not a smear campaign unless you're peddling outright lies. And in Blake's case, the only person tripping over the truth seems to be Blake herself. The courtroom isn't Hollywood. There's no filter, no flattering lighting, and no publicist to jump in when things get ugly. And now that Blake's trying to argue that basic media coverage is somehow an orchestrated attack, she's not just grasping at straws, she's diving headfirst into delusion. The First Amendment exists for a reason, and this judge wasn't afraid to throw it right back in her face. Public figures like Blake have to prove actual malice to win a defamation case, not just that someone hurt their feelings. But judging from the way her team has been flailing, it's clear they thought this courtroom would be more like a fan club. Wayfair's attorneys called it exactly as it is. Blake is trying to silence criticism by slapping the abuse label on anything less than glowing. Her legal filings might as well have come with a red stamp that says, "I don't like what they said about me." But that's not how the law works. Being a celebrity doesn't make you immune to accountability, and it certainly doesn't entitle you to silence the press. The court saw through her pity party playbook and made it clear, just because someone talks to the media doesn't mean they've done something wrong. You'd think someone with Blake's decades of red carpet experience would understand how public life works by now. And let's not gloss over how badly this destroys her emotional distress claims. Her argument that she was so damaged by this alleged smear campaign is now exposed as nothing more than a fragile PR complaint, a performance, not a case. And once that narrative collapsed, the panic really kicked in. Because Blake's next move wasn't legal, it was tactical nonsense disguised as negotiation. She tried to play hardball with discovery, but instead, it just came off as desperate. Her legal team offered to cooperate, but only if Wayfair handed over unreleased film footage, redacted internal emails, and production logs. That's not bargaining. That's hostage behavior. Discovery isn't a bartering system where you get to swap secrets like Pokemon cards. It's a legal requirement. But in Blake's world, nothing applies to her unless it benefits her. Let's talk about the email her team sent on June 17th. After weeks of refusing to comply, ignoring deadlines, and generally acting like they were above the rules, they finally offered a trade at the last minute, demanding all sorts of files in exchange for maybe, possibly cooperating before deposition. And Judge Liman wasn't having it. He called it what it was, tactical confusion. In other words, Blake's strategy was pure chaos, dressed up to look like legal resistance. But the court isn't fooled by designer dysfunction, and while all of this was playing out, Blake quietly dropped her emotional distress claims, just slipped them out the back door, hoping no one would notice. But of course, everyone noticed. Jed Wallace, the crisis manager who had been dragged into this mess, was suddenly off the hook. That's because those two dropped claims, intentional infliction and negligent infliction of emotional distress, were the only things keeping him in the crosshairs. The moment they were gone, so was his liability. And that move? That wasn't just a legal adjustment, that was an unspoken admission. Her case is too weak to hold up under scrutiny. So now here we are. Her smear campaign claim is hanging by threads, her emotional distress argument is officially dead, and her discovery game is falling apart in public view. The only thing that's growing in this lawsuit is the list of people she's trying to blame for her own failure. And don't even think about blinking, because Blake's meltdown is far from over. If anything, it's accelerating. Her usual strategy, charm the media, spin the story, and win the public, has completely collapsed under courtroom lighting. The judge is done with the games. The media's not playing along, and even her own disclosures are turning into boomerangs. If you want the full truth behind Blake's courtroom circus, hit that subscribe button and stay locked in. It's only getting messier from here.